Let's talk about BlackRock. Not that we haven't talked about BlackRock enough. For anyone out of the loop, listen to last week's episode 122. We talk about the BlackRock story. We talk about everything that happened. We break it all down. And the bottom line is, a BlackRock money market fund is tokenized on Hedera, and it's not the first and it's not the last. And there's a lot of interesting insights and new information that have come out since that story, since that episode that I wanted to touch on. So what some of the kind of impacts that the network experienced from the numbers is like the HBAR Foundation received like 10 to 15,000 new followers when that happened. It was the second largest month for account creation on Hedera since public access, right? So to put that into context, when Hedera transitioned to become a public network and opened up public access so people could create accounts, last week in that period of the BlackRock news, there were more accounts created then since, public access. So that's a big moment. And of course we talked about there being, well over $3.5 billion trading volume within 24 hours. And furthermore, something new that we learned from Hashport, right? The bridge on Hedera that we use to, transport assets across networks to and from Hedera. They don't have Solana support. Please add support for Solana. Thank you, Hashport. They saw their second largest 3-day volume total ever last week from the news that Arcax decided to tokenize BlackRock's money market fund on Hedera. So when we look at the actual numbers from Hashport, you can clearly see the spike in activity, right? Look at this, daily volumes, right? So usually we have about, 50,000 to 100,000 daily volume. On the 23rd, the 24th, and the 25th, cumulatively, right? Over $1 million volume. So that's pretty crazy. And what that means is people are moving tokens from other networks onto Hedera. They're moving liquidity, they're moving value from other networks onto Hedera, right? What do we talk about a lot, right? Hedera doesn't have enough TVL. Hedera doesn't have enough liquidity in stablecoins, blah, 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 blah. Right? Narratives are powerful. I know that the BlackRock stuff was messy. I know that, stuff slipped through the cracks. There was misinformation, whatever. There was drama, and we hate Cointelegraph and all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, when the dust settles, this shows how important a narrative is. And no matter if you have bad news written about you or whatever, this translates to real numbers that solves real problems. And people will ask, what good do these ROWAs do for the network, for the price of HBAR, for this kind of stuff, for retail? And it's residual effects. It's the opposite of collateral damage. It's collateral goodness, right? When big things like this happen for the Hedera network, we get collateral delight that we can't really predict. And you have to look in those corners to kind of see that success. So that's been great to see. Also, we learned yesterday from the spaces that, again, Charles, the president of Hedera, had with Cointelegraph. We learned that BlackRock has since reached back out to Hedera very positively and friendly. So clearly, direct communication still exists and is happening, and hopefully, turns into something else entirely. Also, Arcax was also on that spaces as well, sharing some insights. And they said something interesting. They want to tokenize Bitcoin ETFs because they said the reason, and this makes a lot of sense. If you have an ETF, right, on a market, the underlying asset being Bitcoin, that asset itself trades 24 hours a day. You wrap that up and put it in an ETF, and you put that in a market that's only open for certain periods of time, right? You start to see the inefficiencies, you start to see some of the pain points there. So what RCAX is kind of saying is like, if we can tokenize those ETFs, we can still package Bitcoin into these traditional assets, traditional finance assets, but tokenize them so they can be traded 24/7. So that was very interesting. And of course, their vision, they've said this many times, is they want to tokenize everything, right? They want to tokenize all this stuff. They were asked, by Cointelegraph, like, what else are you guys going to tokenize? And, RCAX is like, we're going to tokenize everything. And I think that's the attitude of everybody. I mean, Larry Fink from BlackRock says the future is tokenization. So it's pretty clear. It really comes down to, what is the network that people are going to choose? And it's very interesting to me reflecting on this whole story of like, BlackRock was looped in and aware of all this kind of stuff, but it's not that BlackRock was making the decisions on this. They were kind of like, hey, get this done. It's good stuff. Good to see you're doing this stuff. And it was up to RCAX to determine what would be the best network to do this on. And they chose Hedera because, like we talked about, it's, token association. And it got me thinking about, some of the key takeaways here, which is like, I think sometimes we forget the impact of, token association, ABFT, the low fixed fees, the speed, the governance, carbon negative, like those narratives in the Hedera space are kind of played out. I think that a lot of people in this community are kind of like, we've heard it so many times. We're looking for fresh things. We're looking for the hot new thing, right? Being DeFi and NFTs and meme coins, and what are the other things networks are doing? What are the other levers and buttons that other networks are pushing to have growth that Hedera isn't doing? But I think that it's worth realizing that what might feel like tired and overplayed to our community might actually be the fresh thing that other people are looking for, similar to us. And so when I hear that the deciding factor for RCAX was token association, right? Was because they saw what happens to BlackRock's assets on Ethereum, the wallet that was in a bunch of spam tokens sent to that wallet. That's just a really negative thing for someone like BlackRock. There was a lot of bad press around that for BlackRock. So the token association is just huge. And I know that we've got our own problems with it in this ecosystem, but it got me thinking of kind of like, okay, there's definitely some other stuff to focus on in the network. Another great example of this, just, as we transition into some other stories here, but just a quick aside that's kind of similar to this is, as folks know, I'm the director of communications at Hgraph, and Hgraph has been, a mirror node service provider for so long in the network. And I thought that getting into the mirror node business, that I would, maybe get a new perspective, on the network or the community. But what I actually discovered was like the other half of the network, right? Because Hedera, the architecture is unique. On a lot of DLTs, you have one node type, right? Which is responsible for reading and writing, right? You put transactions on the network and then you read information to kind of, see what's happened or make sense of things. And on Hedera, they created two node types. They split the architecture, which happens sometimes. And it was very clever because when you split the node types, instead of having one node type that's good at reading and good at writing information, you get a separate node type, right? The consensus nodes that are excellent at reading information. And then you get mirror nodes that are excellent the consensus nodes are excellent at writing information. Mirror nodes are excellent at reading information. You separate it. And so a lot of the stuff we talk about in this ecosystem are hinging on the consensus nodes, right? The nodes that the governing council members run, that write the transactions, that do all the cool, interesting stuff on the network. But when you really pull back and think about it, right? This network is about reading and writing information. Any network is about reading and writing information. And you could pull back even further and say, half of a network is writing information and half of a network is reading information. And in Hedera, we just don't talk about the other half, mirror nodes. It's clear that there's, knowledge gaps and a lack of awareness or understanding. A lot of people don't even know they exist. And so kind of that is on this theme of BlackRock and this story, and kind of there's all these unique components about this network. There's still stuff to be discovered about the Hedera network. But it's also important for us to kind of remember that, some of this stuff might be a bit played out for us because we've heard it over and over and over and over again. And now we're like, we don't care about TPS. We don't care about this stuff. A lot of people are going to start caring about it. It's going to be the first time they hear it, and they might get just as excited about it as we did in 2019 and 2020 and 2021. Something to keep in mind. I want to talk about that, and that's the BlackRock stuff. That's the BlackRock follow-up. I mean, I don't want to spend forever talking about this stuff. It was just some cool insights, some cool information, and figuring out that stuff. But it also started to resurface, and I talked about the HBAR Foundation Twitter account and other people going a little wild, right? Because the reality is, like I said, the BlackRock thing is not the first real-world asset. It's not the last real-world asset that's tokenized on Hedera. Over the last few years, there have been all sorts of different real-world asset, applications, and all sorts of real-world assets themselves that have been tokenized on Hedera, right? Back in 2020 or 2021, Toko, right, a subsidiary of Governing Council member DLA Piper, tokenized $500 million of securities on Hedera. Aberdeen tokenized a $16 billion money market fund, or 16 billion pound money market fund. So people are starting to share all these stories again. And I love to see that because, again, what's old for us is fresh for somebody else. This is something I learned in the music industry, is like, when you're playing shows as a band, sometimes you just get so tired of playing the same song over and over and over again. It just gets tiring. It's boring. But the reality is the person that's at the show, it might be the first time them hearing that song, and it might be so awesome. And you don't want to deprive people of that experience. So it's cool to see all of these real world asset use cases being highlighted again. But it gets you thinking kind of like, okay, so what's new though? Like, since BlackRock, I know it's only been like a week, but like, is there anything new that's happened in the real world asset space on Hedera? You might be like, well, I mean, it's only been a week. Like, we got to get some time for something new to happen. But actually something new has happened from a project that we've been following quite closely. I've talked about it extensively on the show. I'm not going to go into huge background about it. I just want to share a quick update. Red Swan, which is a real estate marketplace that tokenizes real estate, they're beginning now to tokenize $5 billion in real estate as their portfolio, and they're tokenizing it on Hedera. And they have, as we talked about before, they have an open source platform and tooling set to do these different types of things. That's very impressive. And it's exciting because, we've talked about this on the show before too. Groups like Boston Consulting, they've projected that this is going to be, a $16 trillion market, the tokenized real estate market. So by 2030. So it's huge. And those are numbers based off of the technology we have available now. So I can only imagine the rate of adoption is going to happen when new technology is brought into the fold. So that's very exciting. Now, this is where we start to get interesting, because I want to talk about something important